All right, here we go. Rocking and rolling. We have some found time. Oh, I should put the link in. Um, because I wouldn't mind having some friends. Uh, I've been doing a slight degree of binging of some Jordan Daniel Wood, my new one of my man crushes. So, we have the Gosling, Ryan Gosling, who's maybe number one. Who else do I have a man crush on? Shia LaBeouf, um, Jordan Daniel Wood. A lot of people. Um, and I mean all this in like terms of the divine eros, not so much other ways. So I don't know. I wanted to. What was the initial prompting for me to want to talk about this with hopeful universalism? I guess it's one of my pet peeves. This is maybe an annoyance when people, when the topic of universalism comes up. I don't know. There's a lot of And I think in the description of this, I linked a really great interview with Jordan Daniel Wood. I will again promote, which I've promoted in every one of these live streams, that other conversation with Jordan Daniel Wood, on Mystery and Reason with John, that comes up in 4 different parts. Because I think in both of these interviews, he does a really great job dispelling common misconceptions about Christian universalism. Particularly, I don't know, there's lots of resources in this regard for people that are interested. George MacDonald's Justice Sermon is a great one that I point people to. But very often, I don't think, well, this comes up with that reminds me of another idea for a live stream. But what comes up is like you can often lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. Or another idea that I'll tease for a live stream is that if you can't, or if you don't remember it, forget it. If you can't remember it, forget it. Because I don't know, I love thinking about memory, and part of that comes from this book. Uh, this guy, Chad the Alcoholic, might like this. It's Walter, or no, Wallace Stegner. Uh, Crossing to Safety. But so this is ironic, right? There's a quote in it, which I don't remember exactly. I need to go back and find it to commit it to memory. It's very short, but essentially it's just like, it talks about the error of thinking you need to write things down because if something has made an impression on you, there's no need to write it down. And that gets into the idea of what is the Greek word from? There's a Greek word in the New Testament that's often character. That the etymological word of character, I think in the Greek, has to do with engraving, like engraving in stone. So if something has left an impression on you, like think a memory foam mattress, and you press into it, and your impression is left there, like it has changed the impression has changed the physical reality. And so if something has left an impression on your memory, you won't need to write it down because you'll remember it. And that gets, it gets into Socrates' lament of the written word, and writing will make us forget all that stuff. But if something has been impressed upon you, you don't need to write it down. You'll remember it if it's important, essentially, is what that would be. But circling back to hopeful universalism and hell. So from this book, Wallace Stegner, yeah, it's something like, yeah. So they say, no need to write it down if it's made impression. Uh, what up? Yeah, what up, brother? Um, so my pet peeve with hopeful universalism is mainly this: that it's just like, who isn't a hopeful universalist? That's the question I would pose. Um, I mean, if you're an atheist, whatever. I understand that. Phil, maybe come back to your question. I want to work out this other thought first. um, and maybe I'll just save that for the other live stream. But hopeful universalism is essentially the idea that we can't. What you're essentially saying is we ought not to be dogmatic about universalism. and particularly Daniel Wood does a great job explaining this, the means of that apokatastasis, like the ultimate reconciliation to God, that God will be all in all things will somehow be reconciled to God, the highest idea, the universe, whatever. I'm trying to uh, leave. If you're triggered by the idea of God, whatever. It's just that everything in the end, everything will be made right. You know, the universe, Martin Luther King, the universe bends toward justice. You know, because to me, the idea. Okay, this is where I want to go with it. Who would not want to believe that everyone is reconciled to God? And by that I mean all wrongs are made right. Every sin is accounted for, uh, paid, reconciled, repented of. All people, because that's what it means to be made right to God, is that you are also made right simultaneously to everything else. It scales all the way up and scales all the way down. Who doesn't want that? Who wouldn't want that? Um, the only thing I can think of is like psychopaths. Like psychopaths, people who are truly malevolent due to some kind of uh, psychopathic or psychological problems. Like they're the ones who wouldn't want people reconciled to God. And as Christians who are called to love their enemies, you want the good of your enemies. Essentially, that's what that means. To want the good, to wish the goodwill of all mankind. Who doesn't want that? Take it to the take it to the nth degree. Hitler. Who doesn't want Hitler to receive justice and to be reconciled to everyone that he's wronged, for full repentance to happen, for him to see and know the full context of what he's done, and try to be reconciled to everything? I sound like Job. Well, that's good. If I do, praise God. Um, um, and to me, that story where the goodwill of all mankind, everyone is reconciled to God, and all the way down, everyone they've wronged, they've repented of all of their sins, peace on earth and goodwill to men. Okay, if that were to happen, right? That's the best story. If you can think of a better story than that. Sorry, I gotta mute my phone. Dingy, 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 dingy. Um, if you can think of a better story than everything being reconciled to the highest reality and truth and person, which I call God, seen in Jesus Christ as a Christian, uh, and also like that's kind of what Jesus did, right? Jordan Daniel Wood says this too, like the God who leaves the 99 to save the one. That's the best story. There isn't a more beautiful story. So like who doesn't want that? So then essentially like the term hopeful universalist is like a misnomer or an oxymoron, or like the only way that it could be, I don't know. Like I just unless you think universalism is like some kind of just like whitewashing over people's sins, and that there isn't really justice, and that wrongs aren't really made right, and then somehow like what does that even mean for somebody to be saved if they're not reconciled to their enemies? What is salvation then? Like just merely some transactional go to heaven thing? Like that's the dumbest conception of heaven there could possibly be. Like that's transactional. That's actually mammon. And so, all right, here we go. Stephen, which one? Those parts of the scriptures where Christ talks about loving your neighbor and love everyone make full sense only in Christian universalism. Yeah. And so if all that's true, that everything is reconciled to God, even if you don't know exactly what that means and how that's going to look and the mechanism, and what about the intermediate state? What about life after death? What about before the resurrection? What about after the resurrection? What about the first judgment? What about the second judgment in Revelation? All that stuff. I don't know. I don't know how that all works. I don't know the mechanisms. I don't have to. But at the very simple 30,000-foot view, which is where I like to sit and reside, at least when it comes to intellectual musing, um, is that's the best story. And if we're going to go with like a beauty first ethic rather than what I would call an egoic intellect, uh, what I can comprehend and systematically, mechanistically fit together and work out the like the mechanism of, through whatever biblical exegesis or whatever say you. I mean, however you want to go there, whether it's through uh, vain philosophy and empty deceit or exegesis or whatever. The beauty first approach would say this is the best story. And I guess that so for me that was my shift. That's when I that's when I decided. That's when I probably moved. So my brief journey is I grew up just the water you swim in, American evangelicalism, hell, which is essentially infernalism, which I guess Jordan Daniel Wood in one of these podcasts he said Balthazar is the one who coined that term, I think. Anyhow, because someone in a comment somewhere was, I don't know, giving me crap about saying infernalism. But I like the idea of infernalism because it's like eternal conscious torment and it's for some and not for others. And if you press anyone on why that happens, you either have to go one of two routes, which is either a salvation, an unmerited salvation of uh, some kind of works, which really comes down to, I don't know, I think some kind of works righteousness, because you have this autonomous individual free will who can do this or that, libertarian freedom, and then this person chooses the good and this person chooses the evil, so then this one is saved and this one is damned. So then you either have to, which or you have to go with double predestination or predestination, where these people are saved, these people aren't saved by the arbitrary will and sovereignty of God, which just exercises absolute power, because Jacob I've loved, Esau I've hated, for no reason other than to just show his power, which, I don't know. Many times on this channel and myself, I've said like that is a very seemingly, to everything that I can understand, wicked and abhorrent understanding of God. So you have either one of those two choices, I think, or you have to go like some kind of, like, even with open theism, I would end in a, or process theism or something. You're still going to end in some kind of universalism, because like even Greg Boyd would say that you just because God doesn't know the future and the future is free, open theism, that he's still omnipotent. He's still all powerful. So he's not all knowing in that he knows the future, because the future doesn't exist. And so he's still equally powerful to respond equally to. So I mean, the same kind of freedom that an Arminian goes down with libertarian freedom in the end doesn't even matter on that view either. And like still it all goes back to God. The buck stops here. So hello. Um
Hello?
Who we got here? What
Can you
up?
hear me? Hey,
I can
hey.
hear you.
What's up, Luke?
Luke and Luke, man.
The two Lukes.
That's right.
Um,
You know that I've had the joy of your acquaintance, sir. But nice mustache.
well, thanks. Um, yeah, so I've been kind of following along to a lot of your live streams, and just I'm driving into work, and I've never done this before, but I clicked on the link, and here I am. Um,
Well,
so,
welcome.
well, thanks. I'm honestly really excited I get the chance to talk to you. So where to start? Just your framing of leading with beauty just really resonates with me. Um, I also grew up in the evangelical church, and I'm trying to find my place right now. Currently, we're back in another non-denominational evangelical church, but kind of my heart and my head have been very much fed by um, Bishop Barron. You know, this little corner. I've been reading a lot of David Bentley Hart, and you know the kind of universalism you're talking about. Jordan Daniel Wood talks about. It's just it does something to my heart. Like
Dang, dang
it's
right it
just
does.
it's just the most beautiful image conception. But I just the struggle for me is I've been meeting with an elder at our church, um, who I'm trying to find a.
No! Oh, you're back. Oh, but your sound is gone.
Sorry about that. There's a tornado warning.
Yeah,
Um,
same. Same for me. Hopefully we don't
okay.
die. We must be close to each other.
No, I'm actually down here in Arkansas, so because you're up
What the
in
heck?
Minnesota, yeah.
No, this is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. What is happening?
Oh, okay. I guess that's what it was.
Okay.
But anyway, at this non-denominational church we're part of, I've been meeting with an elder, who I'm really trying to find a spiritual mentor, someone who can kind of lead me in spiritual maturity. But
Yeah, for
he
sure.
first thing he recommends is systematic theology by Wayne Grudem.
Oh yeah! That guy will lead
I
you
bet.
straight into the path of what I call POS theology, which will make
Oh
you
my
have,
gosh.
if you want to be led into self-loathing, go down that path. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, I honestly thought that you would, yeah, uh, have something to say about that. It just, man, I when I open up Grudem, it feels like I'm just walking into like a hermetically sealed chamber.
Yeah,
Like
the closed circle of
just
the
the
serpent.
yeah, it just feels so claustrophobic. Like, and I contrast that with this kind of the beatific vision opening
Mm-hmm.
up, like almost like a Dante being led upward, or like
Yeah,
as you say, like what is it, inward and upward.
yeah.
um it just feels like that this kind of Grudem systematic theology, it feels like an antithesis to that, and it's hard for me to find words to articulate it. But I mean, do you know what I'm saying? I feel like you've
No, I
experienced
do.
that.
It's no. I was very much in that world. It's the so to relate to it. Do you follow PBK stuff, Paul's stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
Paul
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Vanderplay?
yeah, for sure.
Okay. So he just put a video out today, and I'm sorry, I'm a very circumambulating thinker, so I'll come back to your thing. But he put out this talk today, and I just made a comment on it. I haven't watched all of it, but Justin Brierley, it's about just conversation with Justin Brierley and this other girl, and Justin Brierley said something like, um, the reason that a lot of people end up leaving the faith. He gave a couple reasons, and he said one of them is, what was the first reason that he said? Um, but he said the second reason has to do. Oh, he said it might be that you just think like it's irrelevant and silly. It's kind of the modernist idea of God that the new atheists critique. Sky Daddy, the spaghetti monster in the sky, whatever. The divorced God that's like up there doing nothing, which is not the historic Christian understanding of God at all. The two-story universe, whatever. And then he said the second reason is like it also might ask you to like change your life. So essentially, like it might make demands of you. And I'm just like, wait a minute. And Paul's just like, that's a great point. And I'm just like, wait a minute. So like we do all this talk about steep slope. and that people want to do something hard. We talk about Jordan Peterson all the time. We talk about Jocko Willink. We talk about all these guys that are out there do hard things, and that's resonating largely in the culture. So is it that people want to do hard things, or is it that they don't? Like, which is it? Like, I basically it's I don't think that people have rejected Christianity at all because it asks a lot of them. I think they reject Christianity because they've been presented with a God that sucks. And they've been told, like, you have to believe this or you're not a Christian. That's what I think has happened with a lot of people.
Yeah.
That didn't happen with me because and part of that is, I don't know how much of my testimony or story you've heard, is just because I never just believed that. Like, that's why I never went down the full deconstruction thing. I was just like, I don't think that, I don't know. I always kept searching, and I was very open, and whatever. The rejection always came from the other side, not me. I never rejected God. It was just always the elders of the church that rejected me. But part of that is that systematic thing you're talking about. Like, we have to have this mechanistic understanding of God, and we have to piece everything together, which is part of what I'm trying to avoid, even with universalism. Like, I don't know how it works.
Yeah. 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 I think it's leaving space for mystery. I think that's a big part of the
Yeah.
solution. Um, Almost a humility,
Yeah.
like epistemic humility, um,
Yes.
in all of this. It's
Totally.
just, man, that's just like, it's like salt, when it comes to theology. I feel like you can tell, like, if you're reading a work of theology and the theologian has a certain amount of epistemic humility, it just salts the prose and leaves space for not
Yeah.
everything being all lined up. And what feels just so, I don't know if it's diabolical or what, but just that approach of just having everything lined up and it all fits together. It's a big equation, in Grudem's systematic theology. And it's like, here it is. Like,
Yeah.
accept, take it all. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. And part of it is like, you can't a quote I like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Part of it is, I don't even want to necessarily disabuse anyone of Grudem and Sis. It, like, if that's your thing, if that's truly where you feel, I think I put this in the description, like, to the best of your ability, and as honestly as you can self-reflect and discern, that's where you're feeling called. Like, that's where the theological muse is leading you. Do it. I mean, you can't not do it. To not do it would be inauthentic, but I think
right.
it's crap. And so, like, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's a good perspective because, I mean, this elder I've been meeting with, he has a genuine faith. I have a lot of respect for him, but it's almost like his journey for wherever he was at, that kind of very logical, analytical, systematic theology spoke to him as meaningful to him. But it doesn't have that same resonance with me. And I find it hard to even know where to begin, like in an evangelical context, to be like, that just doesn't, that's not feeding me spiritually. And maybe that's the way to put it. But I guess for me, I find a conflict in, you have these established, credentialed, say, like theologians or authority figures, within kind of the non-denom evangelical movement in America. And my problem is they just don't do it for me.
Yeah.
I'm I'm going out, like I say, I I love I love Paul, but just, when it comes to that kind of someone creating theological work, I mean, Bishop Barron's been fantastic for me. And just with you guys in Grail Country, I mean, just I love being able to dip into discussions of um, Barfield, um, and I've loved listening to Jordan Daniel Wood, and haven't had a lot of direct exposure to the patristics, but just having this this larger Christian tradition that's just full of dialogue and an open theological discussion, different theological currents. I mean, to me, that's just it gives
it
like
it
space for
has
my
to be.
soul to roam, you know.
Yeah,
And
well, it has to. That really reminds me of my priest once. I was actually interestingly I was traveling to this. I didn't even know who he was at the time, but this was my I was pretty early into Orthodoxy. I still am by all accounts. But I was going to a local lecture and I was riding with my priest, and my priest was bringing the lecturer to this local place in Minneapolis called Anselm House, and it was Father John Bear. Do you know, have you come across Father John Bear
I'm
yet?
not familiar now.
He's fantastic. You should check him
Okay.
out. He's spoken to, like, he's been on Sam's channel. Do you know Sam?
Oh
Sam
yeah.
Tiedemann.
Yeah. I follow Sam. Yeah.
So Sam's a good friend. He's been on his channel, Father Bear, but Father Bear's great. He's probably one of the, especially in English, one of the greatest known, probably public Orthodox thinkers today, I would say.
Okay.
Um, and so I was writing in this car to Father. I didn't even know who he was at the time, so I'm just like writing in the car to go to this lecture. And so whenever you're a convert to Orthodoxy, Orthodox are always, it's always like a little bit of a surprise because it's not like a proselytizing, converting kind of a religion. Like you kind of seek it out on your own. It's much more like Judaism or something in that regard. And so whenever you show up to Orthodoxy, to like anything Orthodox, and at that time I wasn't Orthodox yet, I was just an inquirer. They're kind of just like, they just, everybody assumes you're Orthodox. But so I was telling him, that I wasn't or whatever. And then he asked like why I was interested in Orthodoxy, and I was trying to describe it. And I would be able to do it better now, but I essentially said that. What you just said, it reminded me of it. I said it feels very, and I was searching for words, and my priest said free. Like, and it's like that. It's just like it's free and it's open and
Yeah.
and people will like whatever,
Yeah.
people will quibble at that and they'll say no, it's not. And but it definitely is theologically, like even the way that they hold to theology and canons, like canon law in the East is very different than the West. Like they don't have a magisterium. They don't have like a
Right.
big set of doctrine that everybody needs to adhere to. It's like even for example, the doctrine of hell. That's something that I don't know, it just really struck me anew listening to that Jordan Daniel Wood, that new conversation that I put in the description here, that infernalism, like this particular understanding of hell that kind of has taken over the world through the West and technology and Far Side comics of eternal conscious torment, like that
Yeah.
that view of hell is like is a Western thing. Like it's a post-Augustinian thing that just took over the West, but that never happened in the East. The East has always been a lot more, there's never been, I don't know. I guess I'm probably speaking out of term. We'll probably see people in the comments that will say this, but like, like people will say universalism was anathematized, but then I think it was maybe refuted at a different council. So like, but it's all, the point is like it's always been much more open. Like I think you can be an Eastern Christian and believe in all three. And even in the best traditions in the West, like Tomberg essentially, like in Meditations on the Tarot,
Hmm.
affirms like all three. It's just in different ways. And so like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you don't, if hell is like is more like a state of mind and a state of being, like you can be in hell whenever at any time, and it's kind of almost outside of time. Like if you're suffering, if you're like in an intense
Right.
mode of depression or suffering, you're in hell. And, like, time doesn't
Oh
even
yeah.
matter. Like, how long does that last? I
Yes.
don't, forever? I don't, like, a long time. It's like a dream or something, you know? Like, time is irrelevant.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so, I wanna get your thoughts on this too, because it's like, so part of what I wanted to get at in this live stream was I don't I'm becoming more uh, frustrated or uncomfortable with people saying you can't be a universalist and be dogmatic, which I understand. Like in general, I'm not a theological colonist. Like I don't think you should tell anybody else what to think. All you can do is say what you think, And then if that
Hmm.
resonates with someone, cool. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, belief is personal, you know, like, it comes from within the person.
Yeah.
It can't come from outside, although it is connected to all these different things that we participate in. So this is my thing, is just like, why do people think, and maybe people don't think this, but like, why is it okay to be dogmatic about infernalism or like annihilationism? Like, you can say like, I think the Bible teaches this, for like why is universalism off the table to say like, I think the Bible teaches this and I think this is the best story? Like, why can you not say that?
I don't
Like,
know.
it just seems insane to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I think I've been listening to David Bentley Hart's Apocalypse and Tradition, and to me, it's very revelatory to think about. There are these key points in the evolution of dogma where you have a conflict that has to be resolved. And before that point, the conservative side, hey, Paul,
Hey, Luke.
Sorry,
um,
I didn't even see you. Sorry, keep going, Luke. Don't get distracted by his
but
beauty and popularity.
the conservative side, um, gosh, up until the conflict is resolved, they're the ones upholding tradition until dogma shifts, and then it's
Right.
the liberals who become the orthodox, and the traditionalists become the
Yeah.
heretics.
Yeah.
And it's almost, I think, for us situated in time, we don't know how doctrine will evolve. And I think that, to me, it bolsters a notion of, being true to the spirit within, being faithful to what you feel like God is revealing to you through the spirit, because there's so much unknowing. And I think there are people who stand with, tradition on their side. Who knows if tradition will always
Which
bolster that
tradition,
position? I mean,
right?
yeah, we're still, and I feel like we're still working things out, but I think it's a precarious place to be, say, the vanguard. You don't know if you're right or not. I mean, like you're saying, Luke, I think you can only be true to what you believe or what you're compelled to believe. I mean, with a certain amount of humility, just this
All you can say is
appears
what you
true. I
think,
mean, this is
right?
what the Spirit's
Yeah.
speaking to me. But yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Paul,
I just
welcome.
joined. Sounds like a very interesting conversation, though.
Yeah, do you have thoughts when you were joining?
Well, I like what Luke was just saying. I don't think we're going to get away from. I mean, being a person is all about selection of attention and then posture towards that which we're paying attention to. And so, doctrines with respect to eternal perdition, annihilationism, universalism, these things clearly evolved, and they were important enough in communities that communities in some ways policed and regulated with respect to them.
Yep.
And I don't think I think there's sometimes an a desire that we can have non-policing, but you can't have a community which doesn't police anything, because then in a sense you don't have a community. Your community is defined by what you say yes to and what you say no to. And because part of saying yes to some things, because we're limited in time and space and attention, means we by default or explicitly say no to others. And so
So what
and
about thought policing though?
what about thought policing? We can't
You
police
said,
each other's thoughts. We can only police what we act and what we say.
but that, well, yeah, this is the, I mean, some of that's the free speech thing too, because all I'm advocating is that people this is my big critique and always has been of confessionalism, is I think confessionalism is a spirit that inhibits people to say what they really think, which is a form of passive soft power thought policing.
Yeah. There was a great, I wish I could find it. There was Peugeot said something once when he was talking about that which shouldn't be spoken. You know, I might have thoughts about your mustache. You might have thoughts about my beard. And
They're good. Feel free to say them.
Oh, you implicit thought policeman. I like your mustache. I got two guys with mustaches here, and I just trimmed my beard a little bit today. I don't know if it's enough.
Is it heaven? The blessings. Two Lukes with mustaches.
But I wish I could find that, because I remember it was just a light bulb going on about things that you can't say and shouldn't say, things that should not be said. I mean, we have that in, oh gosh, you have that in romantic situations between men and women. I mean, that's one of the clearest things that, you know, a woman walks in and you make a comment, about her appearance. Well, you know, you can get into trouble for that. And so you just keep your mouth shut. But silence is an option, and it's an important thing. And, you know, it's interesting that, again, at the book of Job puts his hand over his mouth after, you know, chapters and chapters of not having it over his mouth. So it's not just a binary yes or no with respect to these things. It's always yes, no, and other options like closed mouths. And confessional systems are designed partly to give space to that. Confessional systems are supposed to limit the number of things that we subscribe to, so that we can have freedom in other areas. It's a really complex dance.
Yeah.
So
can I?
Yeah, go.
Just an image that keeps coming into my head is, you know, C.S. Lewis's metaphor of, you know, the hallway. Mere Christianity, welcoming people into the house. You know, he's welcoming them into the hallway. Then you have to choose a room. And I feel like confessionalism kind of creates the space, the dimensions of the room, and the furniture in the room. And it's inevitable, you know, to land. You know, you have to have particularity. Like there's no other way around it. I think the uncomfortable thing for me is, and I think this is inevitable too, but you choose a room, you don't necessarily like all the furniture in that room, but you know, no room's going to be perfect. And if you want to be in that room with the rest of your family, you know, like, what's more important? To be with your family in the room, or to have a room that's just perfect fit to you, like to make your own room, you know? And that kind of feels like a situation I'm finding myself in. I feel like is inevitable. You know, for most of us is, there's some things you have to keep your mouth shut.
But which things and when and who decides?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of why I'm trying to contrast this with when people say, like, you can't be dogmatic and explicit about universalism, but like everybody in every church I've gone to outside of the Orthodox Church who doesn't take a position on it has been just infernalist. It's been automatic, and it's confessionally so, and you can't challenge it. And if you challenge it, you become the heretic. But why? And I've known, and arguably, I think you could say this. I'm pretty confident in this, is that more people have left Christianity because of infernalism than universalism. Like the kind of universalism that I'm talking about, if people would seriously look into it, like if you read George MacDonald's Justice Sermon, nobody's going to leave Christianity because of that. Like they're not gonna.
Think about other issues. Think about issues that were fierce. So Freemasonry was a fierce issue in the 19th century.
Which one? Sorry,
Sabbatarianism. Let's pick up
Okay.
Sabbatarianism. What you may or may not do on what day of the week. I mean, that
Yeah.
was a fierce issue in the 19th century and early 20th century. Today, people sort of shrug.
Yeah.
Fierce
Yeah.
issue today is, revolves around sexual ethics.
Mhm.
And, I was just on CRC Voices, and Len was talking about a Richard Beck piece where he talks about the woman at the well. And so I sort of set off the liberationists versus the, let's say, the disciplinists. And the liberationists look at the story of the woman in the well and say, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" And the disciplinists say, "Yeah," but then he says, "Go and sin no more." And I made the mention that I've never been at a classis meeting where a minister is being disciplined for having had an affair, and someone stands up and says, "Well, where's the woman?" Well, the woman isn't at classis. Therefore, let he who is sinless in this room cast the first stone. So, pastor, go back to your church and don't do it again. Right now in our culture, the liberationists would be furious at such a thing. No, I mean, I was just at a classis meeting recently where we permanently deposed a minister for having had an affair with, and it was important that had an affair with a woman in his congregation. So that's all the power, and this is all very salient today. And so
Right.
liberationists that tend to be the ones who want to, open, non-policing. When it comes to this matter, they're really hot at policing. And so out of these things, confessionalism tends to grow. And then you have this historical dynamic where things get set, rules get set, and traditions get set around these ideas that carry on through history, which is really important so that our communities, in fact, have longitudinal historical threads, that they have some cohesion in that way, but then they're always sort of a little bit adaptable too. And, whereas maybe 100 years ago, if you were a Christian Reformed minister and you dared go swimming on Sunday, you might be in real hot water with your church. Today, nobody cares. Well, all of this is sort of the cohesion of a community. And I don't know that, I think, Luke, your issues, I loved your conversation with Sam. I would never want to, I think your voice in this is important because we need to challenge these things to sort of keep them in line. But I think they're always going to be with us. I don't think there's any way to avoid them.
Well, this is why I propose my idea of essentially iconic thinking, which is what I think is happening in this corner of the internet, where we relate to our self-identity and ideas as an icon rather than as a static image. Because I think that's what confessionalism does, and it leads to identitarianism.
So, to understand that, are you saying confessionalism becomes the end instead of
Yeah, because
a means to seeing
you take
beyond?
your safe
Is that
identity to whatever, Sabbatarianism, infernalism, pick your poison, affirming same-sex unions, and you're just like, it's a binary. You get on this side of the line or this side of the line. You're in or you're out, but that's not relating to your self-identity and these ideas as an icon, as something that's fluid, as something that's moving, as something that's open to change.
Right. Well, part of what confessionalism and denominationalism did was afford communities of difference. And, for example, we had a classical exam yesterday where the candidate had to answer questions. One of the questions was, so you have a family in your church that they're a wonderful family in the church, but they're not baptizing their infants because they're believer Baptists.
Yeah.
And really, in some ways, the question was, how hard do you lean on them? And so in the Christian Reformed Church right now, there's no, if you want to dedicate your child in the CRC church, that's not going to happen. You can be a member of the Christian Reformed Church, and most CRCs, you probably won't be an office bearer. So, but yet there are plenty of Baptist churches around. And so what confessionalism sort of does is has these little spaces where Credo Baptists and Paedo Baptists can sort of flourish. And I think that that kind of flourishing affords over very long periods of time sort of a sifting. And this in some ways is what's happened with Trinitarian thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, Trinitarians have flourished in a way that Unitarians have not. Sorry,
Sam.
it's just the truth. And I think there are reasons for that. And I think those reasons get expressed through time. And I think Luke, you're pointing to the fact that you have to be don't get too tyrannical in your confessionalism. But at the same time, I think various structures around confessionalisms, even implicit, are going to be inevitable. Because, with respect to the same-sex marriage thing, I don't know that a religious community can actually really not have a sexual ethic. I mean, sex is...
So this, where I would love to get your thoughts on this in question, because Sam has, let's make it even more personal. Let's bring in our good buddy Sam. And Sam joined the conversation, but I didn't message him beforehand telling him I was going to do this though. So he's maybe working, one of the rare occasions where he's working. But so Sam has often said, he said this, when was it? It was in a live stream or a podcast or something, but he said, how does me self-identifying to his convictions around biblical Unitarianism functionally make him different to a Trinitarian in real life? So this gets into the difference between the self-identity to ideas and then sleeping with your brother's wife.
Right.
Like that's a different thing. That's behavior versus ideas. And Sam's saying, is my behavior, am I loving all the things Christ commanded me to do? Am I doing those things?
Right. And I think I think Sam, for that reason, is an excellent example, because many of us love Sam. We respect Sam. We respect his life. We respect so many things about him. If Sam lived in Sacramento, he would definitely be playing music in my church right now. We'd have to certainly sort things out, and I'm not going to just sort of, because things aren't up to me too, and that's part of it. Because so you might say, well, what about a Christian who's in a very hierarchical church? And what about a Christian who's in a fairly Presbyterian church? Because Sam's participation in my church, people would say, oh, Paul would let Sam blah, 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 blah. But in my church, Paul is not the bishop. There are elders and deacons, and the community itself makes decisions. And so Sam has a real point in that. But again, part of this is also intergenerational, because policies develop not just with respect to Sam, but with respect to any Unitarians and a community of Unitarians in a church. So, for example, let's talk again, a church with respect to a sexual ethic. Well, what does it hurt the church if Bill and Harry over here are in a same-sex marriage and they're wonderful people, and that doesn't really hurt the church? Okay. But what about 100 churches and 1,000 people and 300 years? And in some ways, churches have developed because they're not just paying attention to Sam in one church,
right?
But they're paying attention to Unitarianism in 1,000 churches over 300 years. And no one is there to sort of show the receipts for that. But the way these systems work in sort of a Darwinian frame is that churches that sort of get the policing right, at least mostly right, probably seem to have an advantage going through time. And, it was amazing when Sam first showed up in this community, and someone as, lovely as Mary Cohen, I mean,
they had some issues, yeah.
But in time, of course, once we got to know each other, I mean, Anselman used to go after Sam pretty hard. Lots of people went after Sam. And what was interesting is that all of that reactivity was built into us in ways we don't know. It's sort of like the cat or the chimp who has never seen a snake suddenly meets a snake and freaks out. And that kitten's only a year old. How does it know a snake? And it seems like some of that mapping is built into us. So on one hand, I think it's fair to constantly be critiquing and evaluating the mapping. On the other hand, you also have to give the mapping its due.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, Luke,
if
you
I
talk.
may jump in, I mean, to me, a lot of it has to do with, as Pajot would say, I mean, a correct distance from the stranger. And so, I mean, for a family is built on, a union of male and female, but then that family can expand to include, like the gay uncle who's never going to get married. He can be part of the family, even though he's not instantiating that ideal. He can still be part of the family. And I think confessionalism almost, it's like an inevitable setting of boundaries, but the question is just, what is the relation to the stranger? So how does a confessional body relate to someone who, for whatever reason, falls outside of that confessional statement? Can they incorporate them without compromising the cohesion of that unit? I think that's really the question. And it almost feels like it's a calibration, because there's too much of bringing the stranger in. You no longer have any ideal, anything that binds, so you just scatter. But if you reinforce the wall and you don't allow anyone in who doesn't hold 100% to the confessional belief, I mean, that's stagnation and
But
death,
the
right?
religio, so I want to bring in one thing and then a quick comment on the religio. The religio, though, is always hidden. It's like a ligament. Like, I learned this from Rob Bell. It's the thing underneath that binds. It's unspoken. The credo's spoken. The religio, the thing that actually binds, is not the creed. It can't be the credo. It's underneath
Uh-huh.
it. It's the thing that
Yeah.
precedes it. And so if you elevate the credo to religio, that's what confessionalism is. That's what I would say. And then the other thing, that part of what we're working out, and this is a different live stream that I have about 7 ideas for live streams. This is going to be my new contribution to Grail Country, because I can't ever coordinate talks with people.
It's a good
But,
contribution, Luke.
well, thank you. But I do believe, so I think the evolution of consciousness and the vanguard of the evolution of consciousness is in the West. I actually think it is. But the struggle with that, because when we're talking about confessionalism, we're talking about all these little teeny tiny micro bodies that have been severed from the big. It's like it's not like these confessions that we're talking about have been like, it's different than an ecumenical council where like every bishop in the world was at a council and it was completely agreed upon, and so like that's what they said had the seal of the Holy Spirit. Like when we're talking about like Sabbatarianism or like what color a carpet that churches splinter over now, like that's we're so far severed from the church speaking in unity, and I mean this, and tradition, like the bigger tradition, because it's all come down to like this individual. I mean, the whole what is the West comes into the conversation in this whole thing too. So
Just so you guys know, I just started streaming this to my channel too.
oh, jeez. Just so you know too, I have to leave at 2:30, so you can like, can you carry it on? But anyway.
Oh, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
I liked Luke F. What? I've never seen you here before. Have you been on any of these live streams before?
No, I haven't made it. I've been kind of lurking for, I don't know, 2 years or so. I was able to connect with Ted S from Arkansas,
Oh, good.
He's
live and in person. I'm in Arkansas as well. We're about like 2 hours from each other. So.
Okay. You know, Luke T, when you talk about the thing under the creed, I mean, this is the same dilemma that we have with like language. You're right in that the best, our best apprehension of these things are iconic rather than idolic. In that there's something when we're using language, when we're using the creed, we're pointing through them to something else. but especially as human beings trying to connect with each other, the language is what we have. And we have this through time too. And this is, it's funny, in our classis meetings when we do these examinations of candidates, Trinity will always come up. And one of the
And your
things
classes stuff does?
oh yeah. Well,
Huh.
and nobody's denying the Trinity because of confessionalism, because, well, you pretty much know if you deny the Trinity, you're going to be on the outside.
Right.
But as you and Sam noted, okay, well, explain the Trinity. And so, I dealt with this a little
Easy.
bit in my Colossians sermon, where if you look at, like, say, the Christ hymn that's in Colossians 1, if you try to put that hymn into your own words, you will probably wander into heresy. So the only way to not wander into heresy is to embrace the words that are there. And that's, that's that whole saying about the creed, to keep the words of the creed, because if you choose other words, and so even though you are pointing to things under the words or through the words, most of us are best just sticking to the words, because when we try to get beyond the words, everyone else around us begins to realize we're getting into trouble. I mean, one of the interesting things that happened in the 19th century was this big wave of biblicism in the burnt over district, where everyone's like, wow, we're gonna rediscover real Christianity. I'm gonna read the Bible for myself without any creeds or confessions, and if I appropriate the Bible to myself, then I will have it. And that's where, and we didn't have sort of one thing that emerged, as, let's say, Luther had hoped in the Reformation period. We had the LDS Church, we had the Jehovah's Witnesses, we had the Seventh-day Adventists. There were the Millerites. There was just this explosion of churches that varied tremendously. And so for this reason, the creeds sort of help keep us together by saying, if you sort of stick with the creed, you'll probably be able to be in the depth of the pool that you can still touch. But if you try and go out beyond it, things are going to get squirrely, especially for a so-so swimmer.
So here, what that made me think of is this comment. So I'm throwing my own terms and I'm controlling the dialogues. It's my stream. So this is something I've thought a lot about, and I think it's true. So I was really into classical education for a while, and just education in general, I think demands that, like, this is part of why you can't just plagiarize things. And part of knowing if somebody really has understood something is that they can say the thing in their own words. That's part of actually proper education. If you can't say something, this is why I talk about personalist knowing being the only real kind of knowing, and definitional knowing isn't true knowing, because you're just repeating platitudes. You don't even know what that means. And yes, maybe are those the training wheels to get you there? Sure, that's fine. But eventually, you have to take off the training wheels. The law is a good pedagogue. It's not ultimate. It can't be.
Yes, and that's true. The old saw about teaching is, you do, I watch, you do, I help, I do, you help, I do, you watch. But that's limited in terms of things that you can sort of manage. When we encourage students to say things in their own words, the feedback loop with the professor is important.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Yet, even if you're using, and the reason we do this episode is because this practice is because if you're just using the same words, I'm not sure of your level of understanding. But that also doesn't mean that, even if from what I hear from you, I think you have it, doesn't mean that the it that you sort of have, that the words sort of lay on top of, is necessarily the same either. And what we're usually looking for is something that's perhaps good enough. So let's say we're carving, and you do, I watch, you do, I help, I do, you watch, I do, you help, I do, you watch. But the thing that I will carve will still not be the same as what the master carves, because there's a level of knowing and there's a level of doing that the master has that the student doesn't have. And even someday when the student becomes a master, the student will not be a copy of the master.
Not an identical replica.
No, it'll be a version of the master, and in some ways might exceed the master, and in some ways might fall short. But this is all sort of a function of combinatorial explosiveness, where most of what we're talking, because by virtue of talking and ideation, has to be a reduction. And it's the same issues in terms of, our relationship with God. All of us in some ways, when we try to apprehend God, we only apprehend a reduction. And so there's always an element of idolatry in there, which is why worship tries to avoid that by sort of taking ourselves out and focusing on in a way that isn't sort of an apprehension.
If I could
Go ahead,
throw something in here, and this is probably going to be the last thing I need to say before I have to get to work. But I think there is something about confession, in the best sense. I mean, I think of the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, and gosh, even learning the Psalms, learning the language of the Psalms as these deposits. Okay, then that do something to the heart. They do something to the spirit. They train someone in spiritual formation, train someone to say to the trellis or to the cross from which they can grow and flower. But I think Luke, I mean, your critique is a confessionalism that becomes a cage. I think at best, these confession statement of faith, it's like standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, to think about the theological work that went into the creeds, it is a blessing to have that language, to then use that as a springboard and for your faith to grow from that point. But I think what you're critiquing, Luke, and kind of modern I mean, let's just say a lot of modern evangelical churches is, instead of it being a trellis that one grows on, it becomes a cage that confines. So anyway,
Yeah.
the last thing I can say.
No, I really like that, and that's beautiful. And I agree I would agree when it's a traditional ecumenical creed that maintains itself as an icon that allows for the further up and the further in, which is what a creed does. It used to be called the symbol. The Nicene Creed is called the symbol of the faith, heaven and earth. It is fundamentally an icon. And so I have no problem with those creeds. Those are great.
Well, this has been a real joy. I'm so glad I was able to join. But like I said, I've got to bounce.
I'm happy you did.
Great to see you guys. Of course.
Sam, so you were summoned.
Have we solved it yet?
Luke summoned you.
Okay. He manifested me, right? Isn't that what the cool kids say nowadays?
I didn't even cheat.
And for those of you watching, I don't know how I just get this button up that says stream this on your own channel. So I hit that. And so I know this is going out on my channel, but the link to join is on Luke's channel, and it might go away unless someone who else has
I think
powers at Grail Country can come in when Luke has to go. But
Jess does. Jess just said hi. Jess, you can come in and control it because he's on Grail Country. I like to look at all the comments to find out who's watching from my channel because they're the cool people.
No, we were talking about confessionalism and the and Sam's point about okay, so in what ways, and it's funny because Unitarians too. So there's a box, Unitarians. There's quite an interesting sample in that box of Unitarians. And Sam, part of what makes Sam interesting is that Sam is in very many ways fits very comfortably in the evangelical box, though he be a Unitarian. And there's a huge diversity of Unitarians with respect to, let's say, Christology. And part of what makes Sam interesting is, to the degree that I understand Sam's Christology, it's at least a very high Christology. But the truth is, now that Sam has colonized a certain portion of my consciousness Congress, there's Jess. When now I'm going through the book of Colossians, and I run into these verses, and I look at different readings of them and so on and so forth. But as I go through the book of Colossians, I just think, I'm glad I'm a Trinitarian. I think this just works better.
I might make a response video to that, although I feel weird making a response video to a sermon. But
I did. A lot of people didn't like what I did to that poor woman who just gave a talk at a sermon at a tech conference.
Fair enough. I guess anything on the internet's fair game. But I also need to respond to Father Stephen DeYoung, who is taking shots at me on the Lord of Spirits. So.
Oh, really? On his podcast?
Yeah, he's taking shots, saying he's super smart.
Coming at me. I'm going to have to fire back on. I'm getting hit on multiple fronts.
I'm not coming after you.
All right, that's fine. I mean, I'm not an anti-confessionalist either. I think it's sort of what you were saying, Paul. And I do think that part of what you can see was one of the mistakes of the Unitarian movement in the early 1800s in the United States was getting rid of all creeds and all propositional definitions of belonging. And that's part of what summoned the spirit of whatever is guiding Unitarian Universalism at the moment. And I'm not quite sure what spirit it is, but I don't think it's the Holy Spirit. And I do think, sort of the you kick out a spirit and 7 worse things come back in problem was part of what happened when early Unitarianism in the US was de-creedifying, de-propositionalizing itself. Because there was like a solid 50 or 100 years where relatively conservative Unitarianism was pretty common in the United States, especially in New England. But it just slowly, and there were signs of it from the beginning, of it going in the very liberal, and I think that really is the right word, direction. So I'm not completely against confessionalism either, but
You're not against confessions. You're against confessionalism.
I'm against confessionalism. I guess you're right.
Thank you.
I'm not against confessions. I'm not against all creeds. I'm happy to recite the Apostles' Creed, and not just because I agree with it, but because I think that's a perfectly fine and good thing to do together as a church. Yeah.
Jess, tell us the truth of Job and save us.
I'm a one-trick pony. Come here.
I haven't cried a while. I haven't cried in a while, Jess. If we can,
all right,
talk about Job and cry.
I can. I mean, just get me going, and that's where this horse leads. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. I just saw you guys, and I was like, I can't not join.
All right, so we started talking about universalism, and we'd left talking about universalism, and we started talking about confessionalism. Well, because the initial topic was, I think that it's well, I'll just say it mean. I think it's dumb that people say you can't be explicit about your belief in universalism, but you can be explicit about your belief in eternal conscious torment. Like, it's fine to promulgate that, but like you can't talk about like a universalism that takes sin and justice and reconciliation and repentance seriously, like a George MacDonald universalism. That's
Yeah.
off the table. But like we could talk about eternal conscious torment despite like all its problems with metaphysics and how it portrays God, essentially.
Is Unitarianism universalist?
They're annihilationists.
The most common form of it that people are aware of is, but actually the Unitarians and the Universalists didn't merge denominationally until like the 1960s. And there had been, non-universalist Unitarian churches in the U.S. for over 100 years, over 150 years, 200 years at that point. So, but basically, I think an interesting tale is both the Unitarians and the Universalists had basically stopped being really kind of Christian, honestly, by the 1960s. And they're like, are you post-Christian in the same way we're post-Christian? Want to just join together? And so there, I do want to figure out whatever lesson that was. Jordan B. Cooper has been talking about Unitarianism in the U.S. and per usual, he's doing a pretty slanted and bad job of it. And of course, we'll need to respond to him too. Once I'm done firing back at Laura's spirits and at Paul's bad take on Colossians 1, then I'm going to have to hit Jordan B. Cooper, and maybe Gavin Ortland will finally pay attention to me. I don't know. We'll see.
Quick side pause break for PBK. One of my live stream ideas is why it's so hard to quit, or what keeps drawing the people that are in this little corner, and why we stay here. And I think a big part of it is you, because that is the thing. Like, this has all happened very organically, and it's all happened very personally. Your corner of the little corner of the internet is very person centric. And maybe it's just because it's my little corner, but I think it's the most person centric. And the people, like, I don't know, I don't follow Jordan B. Cooper or what, but like, if your main goal is to like build a platform around talking about ideas, you're boring. Like, I don't care about your project. Like, I care about this project. So
Paul, did you watch the Church of the Eternal Logos? I think I'm getting that channel right. Video about you.
No.
So
I figured if you said something important, someone would tell me.
I don't think it was weird. So the Church of the Eternal Logos is very Jay Dyer, orthobro adjacent, men's, issues / orthobrodom kind of channel.
Manosphere.
Orthobrosphere, whatever. And like, honestly, there's some videos of his that I've listened to and kind of liked. It's not like he's terrible. He is a pretty smart, articulate, fast-talking dude. But AC, who is a guy who is in your comment section a decent amount, who got kicked off the Discord server, not by me, let the record show. I did not click the button. I will not reveal who clicked the button that actually booted him. The only person I booted off the Discord by actually pressing the button was Claire Shaw, and I'm proud of that one. But but other than that, so AC, it was, he was poking some fights and getting on people's bad side on the Discord server and got kicked off. And I think he's been kind of anti this little corner of the internet, thinks we're some part of some conspiracy to, what's it called? What do people who want the Orthodox Church to join the Catholic Church, what do they call them? Uniates or something like that? Anyway.
Uniates, yeah.
Basically evil ecumenicalists or something. But he paid the Church of the Eternal Logos channel to make a video about you, Vervaeke, and Peterson. And it was half complimentary, half critical. But honestly, I don't feel like he understood you very well, because most of his criticisms of, like, say, Vervaeke are things that you would often make too. And, but it was also like, and orthodoxy is the obviously only right answer to the meaning crisis. And so become more orthodox and that sort of thing. But, it wasn't a terrible video.
Good. No, Luke, your question to me is interesting because it'll be interesting to see how, let's say, the Symbolic World Conference is different from Chino.
Yeah.
And I, each of us, and when we do a conference like Chino, you can sort of tell, there's a lot of overlap too, because many of us watch all of us, but there's sort of the Peugeot group and the Vervaeke group, and then the strange people like us. And then get the question. Well, this sort of gets into your confessional question though, Luke, because I mean, is there a confessionalism in the Vervaeke tribe? Is there a confessionalism in the Peugeot tribe? And is there a confessionalism in this corner of the corner? And I don't know, we're fairly anti-confessional in some ways. But so then what is holding us together?
Religio.
Okay.
Love.
Yeah. But can we explain, not just explain it, but there's power in identity and in naming spirits, let's say.
Naming is important. That's an area where naming's a big deal. I mean, that's something I would love to actually talk with Yosef and Hezi about. Like, I was gonna talk to Hezi about it a while ago, because all the way back to the garden, naming is a big deal, and I don't know how to talk about it well. I mentioned it to Sam. When was that? The last live stream. I think self-naming, the White Stone name. I think essentially that's my handle. I think that's the end, is when your creation is complete, when it is finished for you, naming won't be a problem.
But naming is important for us.
But we're on this side of receiving and understanding and knowing our White Stone name, and so that's
we're still divided man stuff.
Yeah,
we're double-minded.
Remember Prince when he took this unpronounceable? It didn't work. We need names.
Although even the Tetragrammaton is something kind of like a Prince style anti-name. There is something,
but that's God's name. Right. So, and
we are gods. No, too far.
Sam or Luke, if Sam isn't taking Jesus as God, I don't think any of the three of us are going to qualify.
Well, I'm fine calling Jesus God in the way Luke just called us God. For the record.
Follow the logic of the incarnation. Let's go down. Let's keep rocking. Further up, further in, further down.
Grizz said the thing that holds us together is the YouTube habit we had when Peterson appeared, which I think that's relatively true too. There is something about it that is the sort of people who have time and ability and whatever weakness it is to pay this enough attention to YouTube.
But it's quite remarkable. The four of us. I mean, Jess was on the channel very early. We had a number of conversations, and I remember, before I kind of laid down the law on the Patreon, on the Calendly app, Jess was like, "I want to get him in before this closes." I thought, "Oh, this is really going to close." Well, Jess was right; it did. But we're all still here, which is interesting.
Because that was 4 years
my
ago,
wife wouldn't call it
ago.
Interesting. My wife would call it annoying, dumb.
Turns out we're all mentally ill. So.
Maybe we'll see.
So I'm seeing a video of. I'm seeing a video of Jess on Paul's channel that is over 4 years old. It's about the Book of Job for some reason.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like he's been working on it for a while.
Oh my gosh.
And
I don't remember when it started.
But there's an intersection of all, and there are others who aren't with us anymore. Not that they're dead, some of them are, but Job's busy because he's having a baby. But
I've had 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Job.
what's wrong with you,
Stop
Job?
paying so much attention to your children.
We're obviously ignoring ours.
I've outsourced them, as like Richard Rollins said. I think I've given them away. I've outsourced that responsibility to my local Catholic church.
It is for me, because obviously we are getting something from this. And Grizz talks about some of his stuff here, but Chad and Grizz and all of you guys, and then we had this conversation this morning about Europe, and I'm going to Europe again, and we're going to do the German thing, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I hope a lot of people who went last time come back, because I'd like to see them again and like to hear what's changed. And I guess part of it, I guess, Luke, to your question, part of it for me is that I do sort of operate as a pastor, even in a realm like this. And so even though I can't really sort of keep tabs on all of you, part of me does care. And we also have a greater capacity for outliers like, Mark Lefevre and Grizz and
Navigating patterns.
Yeah, navigating patterns. And people who have sort of been alienated by other elements of the corner. And again, that part of that is me, because that's been my story long before any of this. So I don't know. I don't want to leave any sheep behind. And that's something that
How godlike of you, leaving the 99 for the one, Paul.
That's something that Tripp noted. He would get so frustrated with me when I would refuse to get dogmatic about something, because just kind of roll his eyes. Always the missionary. Always, he's the father looking out. That son's going to come down that road. I'm going to keep waiting. So
Tripp puts up with me. He's got to put up with you. That's fine.
I don't know. Well, why do you guys keep watching? I mean, my channel isn't that large. I mean, it's large is so hard to know when it comes to YouTube, but
I mean, if you walked into a room every day with 2,000 people in it, you would feel like that was pretty large.
Yeah, but that's a different thing.
Yes, but in a way, you are walking into a room with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in it most days.
Yeah.
So for me, this is always, I don't know, it truly is always been a personal thing. I mean, I got the same Jordan Peterson thing, the pastor's response, because I've said this before. I care about the church. That's what I've always cared about. And so like when Jordan Peterson's interesting to me, but all of it's always only interesting because of how it relates to faith and church and Jesus and God. That's just always what's been a big deal for me. But then I got to know you. I got to know Jess. I got to know Sam. I mean, I've known some of these people and talked to them daily. I mean, Jess and Sam and I often are messaging daily, and we have been for years.
Yeah.
So like
really cool.
So we just know each other really well. And then every time that I try to quit the little corner or stop paying as much attention, like I'll watch one of your videos, because like you're the first thing that I usually pay attention to, even though I take little Sabbaths from it. And then you'll say something and I want to comment, and so then I'm re-engaged. And then I have people like at the estuary meeting last time, because I was thinking I've said, this is what I put at my last estuary meeting. I said, I'm increasingly becoming more concerned with just doing stuff here. Like how does all this play out in Minneapolis, and being more involved in the estuary, and what do I have to do here? And simultaneously, like you can't ever get rid of something. Sherry's always challenging me about like diminishing the online space. But the guy said locally too, and this just came up in the comments too. You get all these comments all the time. Like, this isn't just for us. Like there are other people benefiting from it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's a type of conversation you can have here that I've never had anywhere else.
Right.
Like nowhere else. Like maybe 5 or 10 minutes here and there with someone, but it's never repeatable. But it's like you always, like if I ever need to talk about something or run some ideas past someone, I get on the Voxer and I just start talking, and there's Luke and there's Hezi and there's Sam and Yosef and Sherry and Nate and, you know, like all these folks. And if I make a video, like people are commenting, even though my channel, like my channel is super tiny. I still get people that write me emails every now and then. I just got an email the other day about Job stuff, and it's like really interesting stuff that like no one, you know, this is where Sherry, like you said, Luke, like Sherry really gets on people for saying like, oh, online life isn't real life. She's like, why isn't it just part of real life? Like, why isn't it included in our friendships and stuff? Somehow it's like secondary. And I think there's something to that. And then there's also something to like, you know, it's just about, I have other responsibilities in my life. I'm actually supposed to be working right now. So, but there's a refreshment that I get from like talking to you guys, and there's a refreshment that like that I don't feel like I expend energy. I feel like I get something back. And then like when I go do other things in my life, I feel like those other things get better too. So it's definitely not a bad thing. So
It's
the other thing
really
I was thinking
helped
of,
me be able to talk about stuff too. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
me too. And I feel like there's like, because it's more than just having like openness. Like people have a lot of trait openness, but it's more than that. I feel like there's a shared territory where we're all kind of like walking around, and then we're like, but we have to talk about it, and then we're identifying things in each other's speech and in each other's description of things. We're like, oh, that's this and this and this, and I recognize that, and it really is some kind of landscape that we're in. And I don't know if that makes sense, but there's been conversations where I'll come to a precipice, and the conversation just sort of halts, and you're both there like this, and it's the same feeling as standing at the edge of a cliff, and you're just like, here we are, and you're just looking out, and the conversation, like that's as far as the conversation could go, because literally, and then there's other times when you go to an opening and you're walking through the woods, and then all of a sudden there's an opening. And you can both, like, it has the same feeling as walking into an opening, like a clearing, like a meadow. And, you know, and people will have different reactions to that. People will be very hesitant. They'll be like, I don't want to go out there. I want to stay back here, safe back here. And like someone else will be going out and saying like, no, it's okay. Look at this. Yeah. So I've had intimations of that, like through conversation. I'll be like, I'm really like in a place right now more than I am just a linear conversation.
Okay, I gotta go. Sam, what do you get out of this little corner?
I don't know yet. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, you might say.
Oh man. I'm hurt.
Luke's like, am I not enough?
That's how Luke heard that comment. Yeah.
You know what? One of the things that's important here, we laugh. We laugh together.
Yeah, it's not all serious. Like it's real. It's all of it. It's real stuff. Like if this was just that's how my estuary and even here, like because I've figured out we need to define goals, boundaries a little bit. I'm realizing I need boundaries in general as a person because I'm not good at that. But if this were just like an intellectual thought group or something, boring, super boring. Like I don't care about it. Yeah, you got to laugh with each other. You got to mess around, you know. You got to I mean that's part of like, I don't know, communion and table fellowship and church, and the real entails all of that, you know. So all right. Well,
Well, I wonder what happens when you turn it off, if we all go away or if it stays on my channel and I get controls. I have no idea.
let's see. I'm going to leave the studio. 3, 2, 1.
We're still here. Are we still
We're
streaming?
still here. I'm looking at Paul's channel.
It might be because
no, it's still going on Paul's channel.
Is it
well,
really?
I'm a Grail
Without
Country admin,
Oh,
so I have controls. I don't know what happens if I leave now.
It's still going on Grail Country too. Yeah.
yeah, because Jess has controls. So,
All right.
well, I don't know. I think it's love, and part of the poverty of our culture is that one word is used for how many different things, and I wish we had more of the Greek understanding. And I think there is a lot of love in the corner, and love is a complex thing. Love is a really complex thing. I mean, anybody who's in a marriage should know the complexity of love. Anyone who is a parent or a child should know the complexity of love. But I think people come to be loved, and then hopefully to stay to love. And I see a lot of love in the corner. When someone disappears, I get notes. Oh, so and so has disappeared. Where are they? And I'll go look for them. And and yeah, so I don't know. And it is interesting in terms of Luke's mission that I don't know if we could write a confession for the corner. What would be in that confession? What's our form of unity?
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen The Bear. I see it advertised a lot to me on streaming TV, but I haven't watched it. Maybe I will watch it. I don't know what it's about. So
I've only seen one episode. I know it's about a cook in Chicago making Italian beef sandwiches, but I'm not quite sure how that relates to this little corner. Although at the Chicago event, we had Italian beef sandwiches for lunch. If you guys remember, or if Paul remembers.
There it is. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Yeah, we just, like I said, we just had a little get together for the German festival, which I'm looking forward to. And of course, Kansas City will be coming. And I don't know if Israel's ever going to happen. But one of the things that's happening is John Van Donk is recognizing that estuary is growing beyond him, and we're going to have to do some more institutional development. So that'll be fun. Some people have been screaming at me for years because they wanted more institutional development. Well, it's going to happen. Then we'll see what they like about it or don't like about it. But
what does that mean? What does that look like for the estuary groups that have more institutional development?
Well, right now, John Van Donk has been, running all the ElseNet meetings, and that's like 12 2-hour Zoom calls a month. It's 24 hours a month. And those groups are growing. And so you're probably going to need more of those ElseNet meetings online. And so you need more leaders. And so now some of them are doing it. So then we're going to have leaders of ElseNet meetings. Other aspects of estuary, there are other leaders who are sort of covering those. And so then we'll have a team of leaders. And once we have a team of leaders, there's some other little costs about estuary, such as Zoom accounts and domain names. So it's not a lot of money, but there's, a source of money that it might be that, we say have an estuary foundation. We won't call it Mother's Milk of, human unity or whatever Jacob would describe. But, probably something very Protestant like the Estuary Foundation, which, on one hand sort of holds the values and does a little bit of policing, this is what the Estuary Protocol is. And these are estuary conferences where, that collaborates with the estuary, all this kind of stuff that develops eventually, because right now all this stuff is just operating out of John Van Donk's hip pocket. And John is a 70-plus-year-old man who's feeling some of his age. And I've just been basically saying, John, as long as you want to run it, that's cool. But when you feel ready and you feel it's outgrowing you, then we'll start to develop more. So then we'll probably have a leadership team, and then we'll probably have a larger group of, let's say, estuary leaders from all the different estuaries who represent and connect with the leaders. And, there you have an organization. So
bishops and cardinals, and
I don't think I'm very Protestant. There won't be vestments.
I'm so Protestant. We haven't. The Chicago one hasn't even joined the ElseNet. It's like not. That's not like always an intentional choice. Part of it's because I'm lazy, and part of it's because we predate the ElseNet.
Yep.
But part of me is also always wary of something over me, I guess. I've been.
Well, there wouldn't be estuary unless we had non-estuary who's kind of doing the same thing. So it probably keeps the whole culture good. Because if estuary gets corrupt, there's always the Chicago. What's your name?
I mean, we're kind of like the Jordan Peterson meetup, but we've kind of downgraded that as part of our identity, and yet somehow new people find us.
Yeah.
And we've got plenty of people. I don't know. Nate says if an anarchist can manage, so can you. I don't know.
Because Nate's pretty high up in the estuary hierarchy. So, Nate might eventually be the new John Van Donk.
That'd be good. I'd be down with that.
A group led by an anarchist can't be too bad, I guess.
Oh. Well, have we? Do you market your group in Chicago?
Sam? On meetup.com.
What's it called?
Chicagoland Bridges of Meaning, I think.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
I can't wait. I'm really excited about seeing what will happen with every Sunday morning estuary at Living Stones.
That is interesting.
Every Sunday.
What's the difference between that and Bible study?
1 or 2 Thursday nights a month, Who will come up? Will weekly meetings on a Sunday morning, how will that change what we do? And how will that change the people who participate? Grizz, I don't know if that game's ever going to come about. I mean, it's just, I could play one right now. My son is helping with the dog. So, but I won't have my son in the house once he gets a job and, moves to the Bay Area or LA, then hopefully the dog will be ready to go to school then. But, my poor children, they think their strange father.
Chicagoland Monthly Bridges of Meaning Meetup.
Boy,
how about that for a catchy name?
Yeah, that's got to bring him in.
It? What do they search?
Find it? I don't know.
Huh.
I mean, actually, a lot of our growth at this point is word of mouth, friend to friend. But there are some people who come just through meetup.com. There are some people who've just found us because we're on the library where we meet schedule. And they're like, what's that? And so they just come. That we've gotten at least 2 regular people who just found us because of we were inside a public library. And so I don't know. And at this point, we don't really need to grow. We had 15 people last time, which is, I think, almost too many. And so like at 16 or 17 or 18, then you need to split or something like that.
Then suddenly you have to institutionalize. Then you need.
Then we have to institutionalize
rituals and habits and practices and rules. So one of the things, Vandonk and I want to make a video about, because he's noting the 3 streams into estuary. There's the sort of this little corner channel, and then there's the meetup.com, people who come there, and then his church network. And so his estuary is very much made of those 3 streams. And so obviously the church and the meetup people, they don't know the chatter in this little corner, but I'll be interested to see. It'd be interesting to me to see to what degree a weekly Sunday morning estuary for some people becomes they're doing that. Well, they weren't going to church, but they're doing that in place of church, even though they wouldn't go to church without it.
Yeah, it's like how how Ambrose would give his sermon, and then after they did the Eucharist, he would come back out to the people who were listening and answer questions and give a talk to the people who were sitting in the narthex of his church, but who weren't part of the church. It's almost kind of like that again.
Well, Tim Keller, of course, did Q&A in the early days at Redeemer. He sort of asked me anything on Sunday morning. And yeah. Where are you at with church, Jess?
I'm a part of a Southern Baptist church plant
Oh.
that started 5 years ago. So I'm Protestant. I'm an evangelical Protestant in my bones. And
A Missouri Baptist.
well, and I really love my church. It's right in my neighborhood. It's
nice.
literally called Neighborhood Church. And, and so I was one of the founding members. And then yeah, it's different than other churches I've been a part of because like most people that go here are literally in the neighborhood, and all our kids go to school together and all that. So it has like a community vibe about it that's real. Like it's not like, hey, let's try to be a community. Like we literally are a community, and then we go to church together too. So it's really nice.
That's
so
ideal.
far so good.
That is ideal. You know, I have as many of those circles together.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, as you said, I mean, part of your attraction to the corner is that you can have conversations this way that you probably are never going to have locally.
No. Yeah, and it's interesting because when I was launching the KC Estuary, we have like 3 members right now because Lance left. Lance is down in Texas now. He moved for work, but when I launched it, I had a bunch of people come. Like we had like 15, 16, 17 people on the night that I was like, hey, this is kind of the idea. And I had 2 friends like chew me out over it. And this is kind of before, this is pre what the protocol. So
Estuary protocol.
Yeah, that wasn't established yet. And that was a huge help. So pre-protocol, I was kind of like trying to describe what we do, and no one knows what we do. So, and then I had 2 good friends kind of get mad at me at some level and sort of berate me in the parking lot for about an hour afterwards about how dumb this idea was. And I was just I was like kind of stupefied about it, that they didn't understand. Like, don't you guys understand it? And one of the guys is like a overly skeptical former atheist kind of type, who's come back to Christianity. I guess he was raised Christian. And I was like, wouldn't you benefit from like a place to talk like this? He's I don't know. He had all kinds of problems. And then I've had friends that were just supportive of it come a couple times, and they're like, I don't get it. And then they leave, which is fine. So, but like the guys that do come, they've had some involvement with either the Discord or watching certain YouTube channels or something. And there's a certain spirit that we're trying to engage in, and they get it. And we're able to have like between the 4 of us, there's an atheist, sort of a questioning, Orthodox leaning guy. There's me, a Protestant, Southern Baptist evangelical, and then another kind of evangelical guy. But it's just like, so we can do it, but like my other, Southern Baptist friends can't. And so it's not something that people, I don't know. There's a spirit they have to be sort of initiated into at some point. And I think the protocol can help with that and just being in the group. But if they don't stick around long enough, or they don't really see the need for it, they're like, I got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to just go to this meeting to be nice to Jess or whatever. So
Yeah. We had classes yesterday, and so I was asked to just give a little report on estuary, a little introduction. I had two pastors come up afterwards, and they're like, this one guy said, we had a really great class this meeting yesterday. Some churches gave some really good reports, but a couple of pastors came up afterwards and said, this is exactly what I've been looking for, always wanted. And so, of course, I hooked them up with Vendonk and get them into ElseNet, and I can help them jumpstart their groups. One's in the Bay Area, one's down in the Valley in the Fresno area. We've had a Fresno group before, so I think that'll probably be able to go too. But for a couple of pastors, they're like, I've always wanted, I love doing this. And I just explained the protocol and how it works and how the groups work. And so I'm hoping that they'll start, because I can't remember his name. There was a famous Christian rocker, worship leader who deconstructed, and he basically said, oh, I want a church without dogma, or I want a church without, basically I want a church without dogma. And so then some people tagged me, so you need to find Paul Vanderklay. And I thought, well, this will be interesting. But but I think that's part of, again, getting back to the confessionalism question in this little corner. I think in some ways that's part of what we're playing with. I mean, I don't not want Sam here, even if he's a Unitarian. I want Sam here. I want Grizz here. I mean, even it was so funny. The most fervent critic of estuary in the comments has been MJ, who's a Unitarian. What if these people get together and they talk heresy? Says the Unitarian. So yeah, I don't know. I think this sounds very evangelical of me. I think God is doing something, and I think God is doing something with us. And I'm not sure exactly what he's doing with us, but again, to me, it seems to be bearing good fruit. And so as long as it seems to be bearing good fruit, I'm going to keep at it.
this is kind of Chad's drum. He's like, is estuary a way to serve others?
Yes.
Guys. Yeah. I remember, Paul, you and I had a conversation a while ago. It was before the lockdown on Calendly, or maybe it was post lockdown on Calendly. I got one more in, but we were talking about estuary, and you talked about serving people by providing a space for them to think. And that was really powerful. Yeah, that was very powerful.
Well, and part of so I was laying out the protocol for these guys yesterday, and the sneaky thing about the protocol is what it creates space for is for people to listen. And I've been amazed at how every time I do an estuary meeting, and we break up, and so because we have more than enough for one group, so we break up into little groups. I have different rooms available at Living Stones. After each time I go, I just think, wow, what a conversation we just had. People shared stuff that was personal and important, and they trusted the group with it. And their trust was validated and vindicated.
I think I could be better at having my group be a little bit more personal sometimes. How do you do that, or how do you think you can be better at doing that?
Well, actually, what's developed is we have a lot more women in our group now. Our group is probably 40% women. And the women get personal quicker. And It's been amazing. You know, women take to this, I think, in some ways more naturally. I don't want the women to sort of there be too many women so that the guys go away, but um, I've just been amazed how, and I think the protocol itself helps. That the way this is the way that, and because when we just did the meetup, oh, what are we going to talk about? And then the same guys usually have their ideas, and they're sort of in the same vein. But when you're a little bit more disciplined about going around the room and drawing out some of the quieter people, and most of the women haven't been on the Jordan Peterson train at all. They've come with their boyfriends. And but once they start it, and once they realize that this is a place where this is a place where men and women can have a conversation, that gets interesting too. So I don't know.
It's like that when Vervaeke talks about the reciprocal opening. Was it? I forget the term he uses, but it's like you tell something about yourself, and then they tell something about themselves, and then you tell something a little deeper, and then he's like, that's how you fall in love. It's the same sort of thing. And so some of it's kind of led by example. So like if it needs to get a little personal, like maybe you got to just maybe tell a personal story and see how it lands, and see if other people start jumping on board.
Dolly says circling, and I've had a number of conversations with Guy, and I still don't really understand what their circling is. And there was Mencius Moldbug wrote that blog, which sort of went after it. So there's a lot of questions about circling. I just don't know anything about it, and I don't need any more tools than what I got right now. So I'm sticking with the estuary thing. But again, I'm very interested what will happen when a group goes weekly with it. And
weekly with meeting or weekly with circling?
Weekly with meeting.
All right. Okay.
Estuary
I'm still a little worried about neo-pagan elements of the circling thing. I'm not accusing it of that, and I've never done it myself. But I'm like, I don't participate in rituals I don't know the origin of.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know they had rituals. I have no idea what.
Well, I think circling is kind of a ritual, right? It's like not just square dancing or something like that. It's something a little bit more, I don't know.
There's videos of them doing it online.
Oh, I'll have to watch
like
one.
This emotional work, and I don't know.
I'd be fine with square dancing though at estuary. Totally fine.
You'll only do shapes with parallel sides.
No.
I did
angles.
I did a college class on square dancing. It was almost all women, which for a single college guy was
good. Yeah. I used to call square dances in college. I have the ability to call a square dance. Yeah.
Well, maybe at the next
Chicago Bridges meeting, except we're about 95% dudes, and we only have girls when Laura shows up. But
maybe if you do square dancing, some women will come.
Estuary / square dancing.
Maybe it'll compete with paintball for the opening physical activity.
Yeah.
/ parkour.
Man, there was some statistic that I saw that, who knows? I saw a statistic on the internet, so take it with all the credibility that deserves. That like some shockingly high percentage of young men, like young as in like late teenage years, have never asked a girl on a date or never, done anything along those lines. And I was listening to my to the sex ed teacher talk about what the sex education curriculum is at the school district. And she said something like, it was like in the section on teaching consent, that flirting is not for getting someone to like you. Flirting is for letting someone else know that you like them. And I'm like, if only the relationships in the world where someone didn't have to convince the other person to like them through a little bit of effort and a little bit of flirting and whatever. If those relationships didn't exist, how many relationships would there be? I mean, I had to convince my wife to like me. And it took more than one, just whatever. And I think that I remember in middle school, we did classical dancing, like waltzing and stuff like that. And in those classes, the guys had to get up, cross the gym to the girls' side of the gym, and ask a girl to dance with you. And that was part of it. And I think like those sorts of things are so stigmatized now that I think there's a lot, like the attempt is to prevent women from being harassed in ways that they don't like. Great, I get that. But what better way to do that is there than teaching guys a polite, respectful, chivalrous way of propositioning a girl to dance with them or something like that at an age appropriate time. So I don't know.
Dancing was an activity that ostensibly was something safe, but yet it was about,
unless you went to Wheaton College, and then you couldn't do dancing.
Well, Calvin too, but for a while, sort of. Calvin, of course, was Dutch, so more flexible than Wheaton. But yeah, no, I think you're right, Sam. And I mean, my strategy when I was single was always develop the kind of relationship before I'd have to extend myself to get shot down. So you already know what the answer is going to be before you have to ask it. But yeah, leave room for Jesus. Yeah, leave room for the Holy Spirit. Oh, holy crim. Oh, well, gents, I should probably work. I've got another sermon out of Colossians that I don't know if, I mean, the first one obviously dealt with Christology. The second one, not so much. My sermon last week I thought went really well. It's been fun preaching out of Paul, no matter what Jacob says.
New creation. That's all I'm going to say. New creation. God made the new creation through Jesus. If anyone is in Christ Jesus, he is a new creation.
So he didn't make creation 1.0 through Jesus. Jesus didn't make it.
No. 2.0.
Not the foundation of the world.
And 2.0 is better than the 1.0 anyway. 2.0 lasts forever. 1.0 comes to an end.
Oh, so, Sam.
Which one's more important?
Sam. Anyway, all right. Well, maybe this is a good place to land the plane. So good to see you, Jess. So good to see you, Sam, and you too, Luke. And the other Luke. Always fun to meet a new face. So,
all right, guys.
Take it easy, gentle people.
Thanks, Luke, for starting this. See you later.
Bye-bye.